We continue with our study of Parshat Vayikra here, days just before, of course, Pesach, but we will focus on this week's Parsha. And when we get on later on to the Parsha, we have Karbanot that one gives for accidental sins. There's sins, of course, that are intentional. You want to do it, you know you're sinning, and you do it, and there are accidental sins. You don't realize that you did the wrong thing. Nefesh, kitechete bishgaga. The latter category is called a shogeg. A person sins unintentionally, and it can happen that it's not just a person. They also talk about in the same here in Vayikra, if the community sins unintentionally. Vim kol adat Yisrael yishagu. If the entire community sins unintentionally, but there are sacrifices that one has to bring, even for an unintentional sin. And this is an idea, general idea in Jewish life and in the Torah, that you're accountable not just for what you choose consciously to do, but what you should have been more careful about. You're not like fully 100% negligent, but there is an idea in the Torah and in Judaism that a lack of awareness, a lack of concern, a lack of attentiveness and inattentiveness is itself a problem, right? When you sin intentionally, I know that this is what God doesn't want, but I'm doing it anyway. I know I'm being terrible to this person. I know I'm going terrible against these laws. That you could say is rebellion. But an unintentional sin, which is inattentiveness, disconnection, is also seen as problematic. Judaism wants to make us aware and live our lives with intentionality and awareness. So this karban, one could say, it's not just for the act of the sin, it's for the lack of attentionness, it's for the gap of consciousness that's going on here. And so we have this whole category, this karban shogeg, a sinner. It's a karban chatat from somebody who sins unintentionally. Now, there are different people who have to bring these karbanot, and we have a number of different people who are mentioned in the category of bringing these karbanot. And the way it basically works is the more halaga you are, the higher you are, the greater you are, the bigger the consequences. And so we have a regular individual, we have a nasi, a leader, we have the Sanhedrin, a community error, we have the Kohen Gadol, if the high priest makes an error. And what's interesting when we look at the verse specifically with the Kohen Gadol, the words in the pasuk. Let me just scroll down to this, and it's im hakohen hamashiach yechata la'ashamat ha'am. If the anointed Kohen sins, bringing guilt upon the people. So the Kohen Gadol, the representative of the people, the representative of God, when he sins, it's not just an individual sin. It's a sin that causes the people to have to deal with the consequences. He brings guilt upon the people, and the Ramban, right, picks up on this idea. Leadership is not something that's private. A leader's inner state spills over into the nation. The greater your influence, the more your mistakes have outcomes and ripple effects. A spiritual leader, not just a spiritual leader, isn't just about teaching other people. It's also being sort of a scale or a barometer for the people. I mean, you don't have to think so far to think beyond this country and other countries and what it means about the leaders and the way that who the leaders are that we elect, and what does that say about us. And then, by the way, that's not an idea that was introduced in the 20th century. The Gemara already talks about it. I'm sure the ideas were even earlier than that, but it says Yiftach bedoro kishmuel bedoro, right? The greatest of the shoftim, Shmuel, was appropriate for his generation. His generation, needed a leader like that and deserved a leader like that. And you take somebody like Yiftach, who was seen as part of the second half of the book of Shoftim, where the leaders are more problematic, right? That his generation, they didn't elect him, but that was the leader that was sent to them. So, right? A leader and the decisions that they make go beyond just simply their sin. It spills over into the community and becomes, becomes um, it becomes problematic. Um, Now, continuing in a similar notion where it talks about the sins of the leaders, when it talks about the Nasi, it says to us, it talks about the Nasi. The Nasi, again, is a prince. We think of Nasi as a president. It's not as high of a leadership position in the Torah as it is, today. The Nasi, Artzot Habrit, Donald Trump, or the president or the prime minister of a country. But it's Asher Nasi Yecheta, when a leader sins, when a prince sins, right? Ohoda elav chatato, when his sin becomes known to him, and with the Nasi, right? A leader sins. We have sort of the opposite tack taken by some of the commentaries, like Rashi. Rashi talks about how a generation is fortunate when a leader brings a carbon for his mistakes. Right? We know that, like everybody else, leaders will make mistakes. They will make errors. They will mess up. But greatness is owning up to your errors. Greatness is public accountability. Greatness is modeling teshuvah. And of course, we think about the God's favorite leader in the Tanakh is King David. King David is far from a purely innocent man. Nobody is going to say that David never sinned in his life. It's quite clear God gets very upset at him after the Bathsheba affair, after his census taking accounting of the people. But David and his ancestor Yehuda, what they were known for was taking up accountability, admitting their sins. We made a mistake, accepting their punishment, and trying to move forward in life, not making those same sins again. And so, right, we have this. The Nasi is going to make a mistake. The leaders are going to sin. Everybody, no perfect is person. Einish, right? There's no person who doesn't. Who does not sin and does not make an error. And so the Torah knows that, and it's already right. The medicine is there. Makdim refuah lamaka is a line the Gemara talks about, right? It already gives you the medicine before the punishment, telling you it's going to happen, and I'm going to tell you what you need to do, bringing the sacrifice, not just make it performative. Think about it. How is this, etc., etc. Okay, so we talk about they're different people who can sin here, sort of different categories: the Kohen Gadol, the Nasi, the sort of the Beit Din, the Sanhedrin, the regular persons, and it's the same sin, this unintentional sin, but they're different karbanot that people bring. The Kohen Gadol and the Sanhedrin have to bring a bull. A Nasi has to bring a goat. An individual brings a goat or a sheep. And some of the commentaries, they discuss that the carbon reflects the status of the sinner, not just an act, right? It's not just what you did, continue with the same thing, but who you are. Sin is not judged in a vacuum. It's measured relative to who you are, what the expectations for you are. And we you have it in everywhere in life. We have it with, well, that person's the president. We have it certainly with the greatest of our leaders, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe makes an error, he makes a sin. He screams at the Jewish people, and what happens to him? His punishment seems way more severe or out of line. You're not allowed to go to Israel. We know the story. Sefer Bamidbar, we're not that far away from it, but we're not that close. And just the general idea is that there are different ethical obligations, responsibilities, expectations based upon who you are. Sin is not in a vacuum the same way, right? You get more disappointed by certain people than you do by others, and thus the sin can be identical in terms of the action, but it's not treated identically. Now, here, one of the things that we get to eventually, we'll close with, with this idea. What ends up happening is there's the spilling of the blood, and when it comes to the Kohen Gadol or the Sanhedrin sin, the blood is sprinkled inside towards the parochet and on the inner mizbeach. When the Nasi or the individual sins, and again, the Nasi is a leader, but don't think of it like I was saying as King David, then the blood is sprinkled on the outer altar, on the Mizbeach Ha'olah. It's a different procedure in terms, even though it's the same sin. So, right, we have chatat offerings; these are unintentional sins, but some are sprinkled on the outer altar, and some are sprinkled on the inside. And there are those who try to explain it, saying that regular sins affect behavior, the outer world. Leadership, communal sins, the sin by the Sanhedrin, the sins by the Kohen Gadol, they can penetrate the inner core, the inner spiritual core of what you have. So some failures stay external, and some failures, and they can be the same failures, but it's coming from a different person, are so deep and can really transform who you are. And here it's not transforming it in a good way, but in a bad way. But the corrective measure, therefore, is well, are we sprinkling the blood inside or the outside? And I think it's just sort of a model when we do something wrong in life and we think about it. So is what I did just something that was a mistake? It was an error. It was a moment when I was thinking about it. I was inattentive, or even if I was being rebellious in the process, but it's not essential to who I am and what I am, as opposed to this is emblematic to who I am, or shows and reflects a real transformation and change in my behavior, and maybe not one that's very good. And so I think the idea of whether or not the blood is being sprinkled outside versus inside is reflective of this ideas, and should make us reflective of our own behaviors and thinking about, how am I acting, what am I doing, and how and what process do I need to go through in order to correct this action in some way? Is it just something I made a mistake, but it was really just not the essence of who my character is, or I have a deeper problem and I really need to deal with it. I need to think of the blood being sprinkled on the inside.